Okay, so we've gone through the system, we've gone through a little bit of listening, and let's talk a little bit about the sound of the speakers. What do I hear? What do I like about these speakers? Why are we reviewing them here at AV Showroom? So let me start out a little bit with a story I think is kind of appropriate to this review. I've had a lot of people coming over here to hear these speakers. About 10 or 12 people have heard them. We all know how we say once it gets to high price, then it becomes a matter of taste. It's, do you like dynamics? Do you like low end? Do you like neutrality? And what I thought was kind of interesting, sort of the take-home message from all these people coming up here is everybody who heard these speakers all had a different thing that they liked about the speakers, which was their preference. But everyone heard their own preference in these speakers. I had a recording engineer up here this weekend, and they were listening to it. And you all know recording engineers' number one thing is they listen to dynamics. And this person was pretty happy with the dynamics that they were hearing. I've had other people up here and they were just amazed by the information they were hearing. I've had other people up here talking about, wow, they couldn't believe how good the low end was up here. So it's kind of an interesting thing. This speaker seems to be a speaker that speaks to everybody when they hear it. So what do I like about these speakers? Well, I think the first and foremost, one of the things that I've really been aiming for in my system in the last couple of years is really neutrality. Rather than the sounds good school of listening, I really want to hear what's on the record or on the tape. Okay, if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad, but that's the way it is. And I really like to hear that. And I think first and foremost, these speakers really do that. They're not going to cover up things, but on the best recordings, they're going to reveal them in all their glory, and you're just going to hear everything that they recorded in that jazz club, like on the Bill Evans live tape. You're going to hear everything like you heard on the Reiner. You're going to hear everything like you heard on the Serra Una Noche. It's just a really good, neutral speaker. But most of all, I think when we talk about speakers, and we could talk about whether you want to build your system around your front end, whether you want to build your system around the speakers, I think the truth always lies somewhere in between. And I think those who want to build it around the speaker, we want to talk about what is the performance ceiling of that speaker. And I think that maybe we could talk, the Q series from Magico has a little higher ceiling of opportunity than the S series. But I will add that you're going to need to really have great equipment to get to that performance ceiling of the S series. So again, you're going to really get a lot out of these speakers. Yes, they're not going to be quite as good as the Q, but for the large part, people are going to be really happy with the S series. And what I find that I like, and again, whether it's the cabinet, whether it's the way they've designed the crossover, whether it's the way they've designed the drivers, there's just this, what you hear, a low noise floor in these speakers. I talked about it in my review on positive feedback about settling times. There's just a lack of smearing in these speakers. The quieter the system, the less noise in the system, the better these sound. And again, everything in that system contributes to that floor. So your equipment better have a low noise floor, your AC better have all the garbage removed from it, and the cables better be a low noise floor. And that's kind of why in the end I ended up with the Skogran, because I really liked their low end, I really liked their low noise floor. The transparent weren't quite as quiet as the Skogran, maybe a little bit better in the mid-range. I would have loved to hear the MIT. Unfortunately, the MIT went back to the company a couple months ago. But again, that's another speaker cable that'd be really complementary to the Magicos, because again, the noise floor is such that it just allows everything to emerge unscathed. The other things I like in the speaker, we heard a little bit of the tabla. I've got some other tapes where we play cello. And again, what's really incredible about it is not just the extension, but the detail on the low end. You just don't hear that type of detail in most cone drivers. Okay, you hear it in the planar, you get that snap when someone's playing the cello, or snap when someone's playing the double bass, but you just don't get it usually in a dynamic driver. And that's what these speakers really do. They're really detailed throughout, especially in that mid-range, in the upper mid bass to the upper bass. It's just amazingly tight, and there's just so much harmonic information there that's really glorious. And also the other thing that, if people like dynamics, what's really great about them, and you could hear it a little bit hopefully on the YouTube, is how as the speaker gets more and more dynamic, the speaker's character doesn't change. So you don't hear any compression going on. if you go back to listening to the Opus 3, if you listen to the bells, if you listen to the other percussion instruments, there's a lack of compression. In other words, you don't hear it hardening as it gets more dynamic. And that's what's really great about these speakers is, again, they maintain their character no matter how you push them. And again, maybe, what you would get with a larger amp on this, and granted, these are 275 watts, but I think if you could put an even bigger amp on them, what you're going to get is a little more sense of ease out of the speakers. If I can extrapolate from my experience from listening to the cello amps, which put out like a kilowatt into 4 ohms, you would just get more ease with this speaker. Okay, but the one thing that we have to always talk about, and somehow I think nowadays seems to get kind of glossed over in a lot of our listening, is the mid-range. It seems to be sort of the forgotten aspect. And again, if that mid-range isn't right, and that's what I think for the many years I stuck with electrostatics, because they just had that glorious mid-range, is these speakers match it in every way and even more. They just, like when you hear voices on this, whether they be on the tape or on the LP, there's certain presence to the voices, there's a body, there's a dimensionality. You just feel like they're there in the room, because again, what you just hear is that lack of smearing, that lack of noise. Everything just jumps out at you because it's not buried. And it's one of those things that's interesting, that the ear can listen through a lot of this and you become accustomed to it, but when it's gone, all of a sudden then you notice it more. So I think that's, again, it's one of these things that you keep reducing it. It's like, wow, I didn't realize I actually was hearing that noise, but all of a sudden, when it's not there, it just really, strikes you right, or clubs you over the head, as a matter of fact. So to kind of wrap up what I feel about these speakers is, they're certainly not the cheapest speaker on the market. You're talking 32 in its base to 35 in its special finish, but I just think that among the speakers that I've heard out there, there's very few speakers. You'd have to spend double to triple the sum of money that you would on these. Because again, you just have the whole package. Is really, you got your dynamics here, the sound staging is really great, the mid-range is good, and I think people, are just going to fall in love when they hear this low end. I mean, anyone who's a low-end freak who likes organ music or just loves jazz and wants to hear that double bass and they want to hear everything that guy's doing. And what's even more is while that guy is playing, you're going to start to hear him singing along, humming, talking to himself, and it's just, I end up pulling out record after record. I know it's this sort of cliche and hyperbole among high-end reviewers, like, oh, it's so great that I just pulled everything out and I heard what I never heard before. I have to say that this speaker does that. I mean, this thing really owns it. And when you go, and I'm pulling out records and I'm hearing things. I pull out the Bill Evans, tape that the Tape Project put out, Waltz for Debbie. And not only can you tell which of the cuts were done early in the afternoon because there's no audience there versus the later in the evening when the audience started arriving, but now I can tell exactly what they're saying in the back. You can hear everything they're doing, picking up their forks, doing this, rattling their glasses. But most of all, it's just like hearing those little nuances that really bring the music to life. And again, it's that last 5%, that last 10% that what high-end is really about. It's all about how can we get closer to the music. And again, there's nothing that's really more, apropos than really listening to the live music. Okay, so just to wrap things up, I have to say that these are among the finest speakers I've ever had in my system in the many years I've been reviewing, which goes way back to the mid-'80s. I wish I had these speakers many years ago to review with. It would have made reviewing a heck of a lot easier. So I really say, whether it's at a show or try at least go to your local dealer and really try and get a good listen to these, because I think once you hear them set up properly, it's a speaker that many of you are going to fall in love with. So it's Myles Astor wrapping it up for avshowrooms.com. Hope everyone really enjoyed this, and see you soon.